Hey everybody, DM Galabond here. A couple of minutes, we're going to get started with Monster Monday. Just want to let you know if you're on the stream, you are listening to the sound of Stream Beats. Stream Beats is copyright-free music made by streamers for streamers. It's put together by Harris Heller over at Alpha Gaming, and you can find it at streambeats.com. You'll never get a copyright strike on your YouTube channel or your stream on YouTube or on Twitch when you are using Stream Beats in your game or your video. And also, before we get started, always like to give a shout out over to Mo at the Tabletop Bellhop. Go visit Mo at tabletopbellhop.com. He is the OG when it comes to all things tabletop games. You want party games, board games, tabletop RPGs, card games, tradable card games, whatever. You will find it over at tabletopbellhop.com, as well as a galaxy of all kinds of media, from podcasts to streams to articles to blogs that talk about all aspects of tabletop gaming. From new games on the market, spotlights of developers of games, industry news, or just people who are playing the games and theory crafting and doing actual play and all of that type of thing. So, with that out of the way, we want to go ahead and dive right into tonight. Monster Monday for April 26, 2021, we are going to be talking about the Basilisk, which is an oldie but a goodie. It's a monster that's been around for a long time, has remained relatively stable, although there's a few changes here and there, as we'll see as we go through its history. But it's a great fantastical creature that can put a really special hindrance in the way of your party, and also is a source of, or potentially is a source of, very lucrative income for your PCs, because basilisks, with their special abilities, they are highly prized, or at least parts of their bodies are highly prized by wizards for concocting potions and spells and all that other kind of stuff, and material components for things. So the basilisk is basically an overgrown lizard. It's about a 10-foot long lizard, but it has 8 legs instead of 4. It looks kind of like a large snake, and in some editions it has kind of a crown-like growth on its head. It can be of any color, but it's usually very bright and distinctive. It's sometimes called the King of Snakes. Now, that description comes out of the Basic Edition resource, which is the Rule Cyclopedia. However, if we go to 3rd edition, which is where this image comes from, we can see that the creature looks like a thick-bodied reptile with 8 legs. Rows of bony spines jut from its back, and its eyes glow with an eerie pale green incandescence. So you have this lizard-like shape, but as you can tell from one edition to the next, a little bit of a different take on how the monster looks. And now this image that we have here is actually an image from the 1st edition monster manual, the AD&D monster manual. So the basilisk is a multi-legged reptilian horror whose deadly gaze transforms victims into porous stone. With its strong jaws, the creature consumes this stone, which returns to organic form in its gullet. Now that's from 5e. Now, can I just say that makes the basilisk an extremely inefficient predator? I mean, are you really going to go to the trouble to petrify your prey, and then eat it, and then because you can't digest stone, you're going to turn it back into flesh in your gullet. Well, if that is indeed the sort of hunting habits and digestive tract of the basilisk, now you can begin to see why wizards prize little bits and pieces of this animal so much. Its gaze will turn you to stone. Apparently, its digestive juices will turn stone back to flesh. Who knew? So now, from 2nd edition lore about the basilisk, if a basilisk gaze is reflected and it sees its own eyes, it will become petrified itself. This requires light at least equal to bright torchlight and a good smooth reflector. Okay, so now we know that, yeah, despite having all of these fearsome properties, it's still just a dumb animal. It's like you've probably seen in your house or in YouTube videos, like where the house cat or the puppy will run in front of the mirror and notice the other animal, and then they stop, and then they go to the mirror, and sometimes they try to attack the mirror because they think it's another animal. Yeah, basilisk will do pretty much the same thing. Now, from 1st edition, the same edition where this image comes from, we get a very interesting piece of lore. The basilisk is able to see in both the astral and the ethereal planes. In the former plane, or in the astral plane, its gaze will kill, while in the ethereal plane, it turns victims to ethereal stone, which can only be seen by those who are in the ethereal plane or who can see ethereal objects. So now it could basically turn you to stone and make you invisible. So that's another thing that the basilisk can do, according to the 1st edition rules of D&D. All right. Now here, this is an image of the basilisk from 5th edition, and you can see where 5th edition kind of begins to bring some of the elements they've talked about all together. That big cluster of crowns around, or the big cluster of spikes on its head kind of looks a little bit like a crown. It's got all those spikes running down its spine. It's got the 8 legs, and now it's kind of just a big old fat lizard type of thing. And with a head kind of probably more like, what is it you find out on the Galapagos? Is that monitor lizards that you find out there? So it's a lizard more like a monitor lizard or something like that, instead of a lizard or a reptile like an alligator or a crocodile with an elongated snout. But it's considered a monstrosity in 5th edition, and this is also one of the other things that has changed over the editions, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes as we look through the history of it. Monstrosities are monsters in the strictest sense. Frightening creatures are not ordinary, not truly natural, and almost never benign. Some are the results of magical experimentation gone awry, and others are the product of terrible curses. They defy categorization and in some sense serve as a catch-all category for creatures that don't fit into any other type. All right, so now we get to go and look at one of the fun parts of the show, where we wind up going through the various different source books and seeing what the basilisk is like from edition to edition. Okay, in the basic edition or original D&D, which was the plain old D&D before there was an advanced Dungeons and Dragons, it has an AC of 4, hit dice 6+1, attacks 1 bite, 1 gaze, damage is 1d10 from the bite, and petrification from the gaze. And then the basilisk is non-intelligent but very magical. lives underground caverns or wild and tangled thickets. And a creature hit by a basilisk must make a saving throw versus turn to stone or be petrified. All the equipment that they carry is also turned to stone. The gaze has the same effect. Anyone meeting the gaze must make the same saving throw or be petrified. Character in hand-to-hand combat with the creature must either avoid the gaze or meet the gaze each round. And then you can take a -4 penalty on attack rolls if you choose to avoid the gaze. And if you use a mirror when confronting a basilisk, and if the basilisk sees itself in the mirror, it must make a saving throw or be turned to stone. And on the plane of Earth, a basilisk is merely a lizard-like creature made of rock. 90-foot gaze slows creatures made of Earth as the reverse of the magic user spell Haste for 1d6 rounds. And the gaze can still petrify creatures not made of Earth. Planar basilisk can burrow through very dense rock at 180 feet per turn or 60 feet per round. Usually avoids other life forms on its own plane. So that is the original D&D Basilisk when it first came into the game. Now in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or First Edition, still has AC 4, 6 plus 1 hit dice, 1 bite attack for 1d10, gaze turns to stone. Although it has 8 legs, slow metabolic process only allows it slow movement. With a strong, toothy jaws, the weapon is gaze, by which it turns turns to stone any fleshy creature which meets its glance. And then if the gaze is reflected, it can be petrified, but this requires light, at least bright torchlight and a smooth reflector. And then they give you a little bit of information about the color. And they also mention they can see in the astral and ethereal planes. And then, so that's First Edition. Now, also in First Edition, we have a Greater Basilisk. Now, the Greater Basilisk has an armor class of 2, which is 2 better than the other one, and 10 hit dice, and it gets 3 attacks. Which it can rear up on its rear 6 legs and use its front 2 legs as claws. So each claw is 1d6 and the bite is 2d8. And the Greater Basilisk sees an astral and ethereal just as the smaller cousin does. And then, the basilisk has the gaze, which turns its victim to stone. Even if a polished reflector is used under good lighting conditions, the chance for a greater basilisk to see its own gaze and be petrified is only 10%, unless the reflector is within 10 feet of the creature. So the gaze weapon attack is effective out to 50 feet. But the creature is so nearsighted that it cannot see its own gaze unless the reflection is within 10 feet. So, yeah. It's got a terrifying property, but it's kind of dumb. It's just not very intelligent here. Okay, so now we go to Second Edition. Second Edition D&D, or AD&D. There are 3 flavors of Basilisk in Second Edition. You have a Lesser Basilisk, a Greater, and a Dracolisk. So the armor class is 4 for the Lesser with 6 plus 1 hit dice. So basically the normal Basilisk from previous editions is now considered a Lesser Basilisk. The Greater Basilisk from before is still there. Armor class 2, 10 hit dice, 3 attacks, same type of thing. And then there's a Dracolisk, which has an armor class of 3, and has 7+3 hit dice, and also has 3 attacks, 1d6, 1d6, 3d4. Well then, pray tell, what is a Dracolisk? Sages say that Dracolisk is the offspring of a rogue black dragon and a basilisk of the largest size. Okay, so what this obviously tells us is that black dragons are not very smart, because they will risk getting turned to stone by by the gaze of this thing. So the result is a deep brown dragon-like monster that moves with relative quickness on 6 legs. It can fly, but only for short periods, a turn or 2 at the most. And it attacks with taloned forelegs that delivers vicious bites. It can spit a stream of acid 5 feet wide up to 30 feet away, causes 4d6 points of damage, half damage, and the Dracolisk can spit up to 3 times per day. And the eyes have the petrification. So basically, it's it's something that has all of the horrifying qualities of both a black dragon and a basilisk without any of the socially redeeming values, or any of the warm and fuzzy type of things that you would come to expect from either one. So it's just basically, Dracolisk, bad news. But a very interesting tidbit in the history of the Basilisk for the board DM to do something with in a homebrew setting. All right, now the Basilisk in 3rd edition. We've seen this image before. It's a thick-bodied reptile with 8 legs, rows of bony spines jut from its back, and the eyes glow with an eerie pale green incandescence. So, petrifies living creatures with a gaze. Surviving a fight requires either careful preparation or considerable good fortune. And found nearly every climate, often in underground areas as well. They lair in shallow burrows, caves, or other sheltered areas. And the entrance to a basilisk lair, sometimes distinguished by lifelike stone statues or carvings, which are actually creatures that ran afoul of the basilisk gaze. And the basilisks are omnivorous and able to consume their petrified victims. All right, so now we have now in 3rd edition, you have a basilisk, and you have an abyssal greater basilisk. The basilisk is a medium magical beast. The abyssal greater basilisk is a large outsider. So the difference is 45 hit points versus 189 hit points. Armor class of 16 versus 17. Base attack and grapple +6 or +8 versus +18 or +29. The full attack is a bite at +8 to hit for 1d8 +3 damage for the normal, or +25 to hit and 2d8 +10 damage for the greater, the abyssal basilisk. And here is a picture of the lovely abyssal greater basilisk. Now that is something that your party would not soon forget if they ran into it and had to fight it. Now, in addition to having a petrifying gaze, it also has the ability to smite good. It's got resistance to cold 10 and fire 10, damage reduction 10. All that means is that if you attack it with cold, you have to do cold or fire. You have to do at least 11 damage, and the 10/magic means that any attack except a magical attack has to deal at least 11 damage to do any damage to it. Spell resistance 23. So that means that 3rd edition, okay, that's not a percentage thing. I've got to look that up again, because in 3rd edition, I forget what that spell resistance 23 means. I don't think, that doesn't mean that it gets plus 23 on its saving throw. But it's some sort of factor that goes into its ability to save. Let's see. Oh, spell resistance 23. I think that means that any spell attack, you have to roll a 24 or greater to actually hit it. If you roll a 23 or under, you don't even hit it with your spell. I think that's what that means. It's coming back to me now. All right. So the petrifying gaze of a normal basilisk has a DC 13 fortitude save, but the abyssal greater basilisk requires a DC 21 fortitude save. And then the smite good, once per day, an abyssal basilisk can make a normal melee attack to deal an extra 18 points of damage against a good aligned foe. So yes, that is that's a really terrifying version of a basilisk, and a lot. Again, another fun thing that you can throw at your party when they expect, oh, it's just a basilisk. No. It's an abyssal greater basilisk. Okay, now 4th edition. 4th edition gives us 2 different basilisks with 2 different effects on from their gaze. And this is one of the things I love about 4th edition, is that they will riff on a monster, and it's a good starting place if you want to think of, well, how can I riff on something? The Venom Eye Basilisk. So far, all we've seen is that the gaze of the basilisk will petrify. No. Not the Venom Eye Basilisk. The Venomous Gaze. So it's an area burst 1 within 10. So in parlance, that means pick any square within any 5-foot square within 10 of the basilisk, and then draw a 1 square circle around it, and it affects everything in that area. So it anybody that's in there needs to make a fortitude, or it attacks against fortitude for 2d6 poison damage, and ongoing 5 poison damage. A saving throw will end. As long as the target is taking ongoing poison damage, the target deals an additional 2 poison damage to all creatures adjacent to it at the start of its turn. So now what this means is the gaze will not only poison its targets, but then it turns those targets into little generators of poison that go out and affect everybody adjacent to them. So it's not going to turn you to stone, but it's going to make you a conduit for its own poison and just cause you to poison other people around you. So that is a really interesting take on the basilisk. And then we have the Stone Eye Basilisk, which that is just the standard petrification gaze. However, we see in 4th edition, they're starting to get a little soft on the effect. Petrifying Gaze. Plus 17 versus Fortitude. The target is slowed. The first saving throw ends that slowed condition. But if you fail the first saving throw, then the target is immobilized. And if you fail a second saving throw, then the target is petrified. So basically, you get a saving throw on attack. If you make the saving throw, you're slowed. and then you can end the slow condition. If you fail the saving throw, you are frozen in place. But then you get a second chance to make a saving throw, and if you fail that second one, okay, now you're petrified. Earlier editions, it's like you make that first saving throw, you fail that first saving throw, you're just turned to stone. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Don't get any second chances. You're just frozen. Too bad. And then so that's in 4th edition. And now in 5th edition, we will see that this is continued in 5th edition. So the Petrifying Gaze in 5th edition, you make a DC 12 Constitution save, and on a failed save, the creature magically begins to turn to stone and is restrained. So in the first round, you're just restrained, or if you fail the first saving throw, you're just restrained. If you fail a second saving throw, then you are petrified until you are freed by the Greater Restoration spell or other magic. And a creature that is not surprised can avert its eyes to avoid the saving throw at the start of its turn. If it does so, it can't see the Basilisk until the start of its next turn, when it can avert its eyes again. So that means basically you can avert your eyes and take disadvantage on your attack rolls. If it looks like if it looks at the Basilisk in the meantime, must immediately make the save. If the Basilisk sees its reflection within 30 feet in a bright light, it mistakes itself for a rival and targets itself with its gaze. So now this just sort of gives your players an out. I think one of the things that has made 5th edition so popular is that it is very accessible, and part of the reason that it's accessible is that it gives the DM a lot of information to sort of, okay, here's a little hint of how your players can get out of this. Other editions or older editions just figured that people who sat down and played were going to think for themselves and, try to figure out, well, what could I do if this thing can turn me to stone when I look at it? What kind of options do I have here? And it just sort of left it up to the player to fill in those gaps. Here, it kind of, you can tell your players this, or you can say that if they come up with an idea of a mirror, it's automatically going to look at the mirror and say, oh, that's a rival Basilisk, and I'm going to go after that and attack it. All right. So those are the various iterations of the Basilisk throughout the editions. Well, now looking at 5th edition, since that's our current edition of the game, we want to think about how to create a hard or challenging encounter with a Basilisk for a party of 5 PCs. Now, at level 1, the Basilisk is deadly, and it's deadly by a fair amount. So it's really a little bit too tough to throw at a level 1 party. But by the time you get to level 2, a Basilisk by itself is just a medium encounter. So you already have to add something to it to make it a hard encounter. And if you're thinking about monstrosities, and you're thinking about monstrosities along the same veins as the Basilisk, you can throw a cockatrice in there, which the cockatrice also has an attack that can petrify its opponents or its enemies. At level 3, it's a medium encounter again, and again, a single cockatrice will make it a hard encounter. And at level 4, for a level 4 party, a single Basilisk becomes an easy opponent. And to make it a hard encounter, you add a second Basilisk to the encounter. Alright, so now what are some tactics for fighting against Basilisks as players? Well, kind of goes without saying, but the petrifying gaze is the most dangerous aspect of the monster. It has some limitations. The creature has to meet the Basilisk gaze for the petrification effect to work, and the gaze is only effective to 30 feet. Now, mind you, this is all for 5th edition. As we saw, the ranges are a little bit different in other editions. And finally, the creature can be tricked into using its own gaze against itself if it can be shown its own reflection within range. A creature also moves relatively slowly. Therefore, the best tactics are to attack from range, or use something like a flat mirrored shield to show the basilisk its own reflection while avoiding looking at the monster. So for a party, that's kind of what you can do. But now you're saying, okay, gee, if I'm a DM, that kind of makes the basilisk not a whole lot of fun to throw at the party, unless I just want to make it a, say that they're on the hunt. They've been sent by a wizard to collect material components, and they need parts from a basilisk for some spell that they're working on. And so basically, it's a big payday, but you're going out to hunt this basilisk and harvesting the parts. So what can a DM do to make this a little bit more of a challenging opponent? All right, well, the easy answer is you could go and create one of those variants like we had from older editions and throw one of those at the party. But then, like if you have the Abyssal Greater Basilisk and throw that against your level 3 party, well, you're just going to mop the floor with them, and it's not going to be very much fun. Because, you may get the satisfaction of a TPK in the short term, but your players are going to have a real hard time trusting that any fight that you put them in is going to be a fair fight if you do that to them. So, the best tactics to use for putting a basilisk in an encounter is use sort of unwitting stealth and surprise. The basilisks aren't very smart. They're animal intelligence, but animals develop strategies for hiding from things that are predators, or for staying out of sight so they don't get bothered, or things like that. So basilisks have a connection to the elemental plane of Earth, and they're often found in dark caves. They also are slow and don't like to chase their prey. So you could use these ideas to set up some terrain and natural features to help make the basilisk more of a threat. Think about having some areas within the cave that are similar to quicksand, and that could slow down or immobilize or hinder the PCs, maybe right next to where the basilisk is taking its snooze. So now, when the party gets there and somebody falls into the quicksand and they start trying to get them out, now the basilisk shows up. Well, they can't easily get out of the way because they're trying to help their buddy. And the basilisk has them all right there where it can try to use its petrifying gaze. So the basilisk then gets that ability of becoming just that little bit more threatening, because the party is splitting their attention between trying to rescue the trapped PC and trying to fend off this monster that, if it rolls well, if the DM rolls well and the players roll poorly, well, it could very easily kill half the party just by looking at them, quite literally. So you'd want to put this creature in a place that the party doesn't have the ability to move out of its gaze range very easily, and where they can't easily detect it before they encounter it. Now, obviously, if they go hunting for basilisks when they're higher level, they're going to have, sort of magical detection spells and other kinds of things, and they're probably going to have a pretty good idea of how to scout things out. They're going to, understand what they're up against, and it's going to be more of a, can we get out of this fight without anybody taking any damage, instead of can we get out of this fight without anybody being petrified. But when you're using these monsters as an encounter for an appropriate level party, you can play with a little bit of the area that you put it and the terrain that you give it to make the monster a bit more scary and make that petrifying gaze seem all that more threatening to the party. So where would you place these in a campaign? So as a CR3 creature, the Basilisk is a good tier 1 opponent that has some serious consequences to it. 5th edition version gives players a couple of chances to avoid getting destroyed by the gaze attack, and there are higher level spells, short of resurrection, that can restore a character that's been petrified. And they mentioned greater restoration. So, obviously tier 1 characters aren't going to have greater restoration, but they probably know a cleric at the church in the local town that could have access to that, either on their own or from some sort of holy item, and might be able to come and unpetrify a party member that gets petrified during a battle. Basilisk is one of those classic creatures every player both loves and fears, and it can add a fun challenge to a low-level underground dungeon crawl. It's just kind of a cool classic monster that you can put in there to, like, oh yeah, remember in this game I can turn you to stone because I'm behind the DM screen. Alright, now, how could you reskin the monster? Well, we've looked at several different ideas based on the variants of the monster in earlier editions, but as I was looking at this and as I was trying to think of this, that 4th edition variation just really kind of kept sticking with me, and because it just seems kind of fun and sadistic to have a monster that can not only affect you, the target, but then make you affect your friends. So, that Venom Eye Basilisk, the gaze poisons you, and then it causes you to radiate poison to your allies around you. So, and also those of you who watch this Monster Monday for a while know that I just love leaning on elemental creatures. I don't know why, but I just kind of have this elemental kick. I just love kind of thinking about elemental variations. And we've seen that the Basilisk does have a close tie, at least in some of the lore from earlier editions, to the elemental plane of Earth. So why not think of basilisks that have a tie to the elemental plane of air and might have a lightning gaze instead of a petrification gaze, or from the plane of fire and have a fire gaze. So imagine, if you will, the air basilisk looks at the target who fails a saving throw. Now, it's not going to be little bolts of lightning that shoot out of the eyes, but instead the creature is actually going to explode, and bolts, not literally explode as in die, but bolts of lightning will fly out of the creature, dealing a lot of damage to that creature, but also hitting anybody within 5 or 10 feet of them. And the same thing with the fire basilisk. It's not going to shoot little fire lasers at at a target, but it's going to make fire erupt from that target and again splash on to anybody that's within 5 or 10 feet of them. And you can use some of the same type of, you can figure out what you want that damage to be. Maybe you could, you could say that the damage to the target is like maybe 3d6 lightning damage or 3d6 fire damage, and then the splash damage to the people around it is 1d6 lightning damage or 1d6 fire damage. So that could be kind of a thing. But then you also have that greater abyssal basilisk, which has the ability to smite good because it's from the abyss. It's a chaotic evil creature from hell, quite literally. And then you have the lovely Dracolisk. That second edition Dracolisk, where it's a black dragon got it on with a basilisk, and they got little babies that can fly and spit acid and turn you to stone. That that would be another possibility of something that you could throw out there is just literally take the idea of the Dracolisk, have a standard issue Basilisk, give it a spitting breath weapon, and give it wings and let it fly. Give it a flying speed that's maybe equal to its walking speed if you want to say it's a clumsy flyer, and call it a day. Now that's probably going to be a little bit tougher because it has an extra attacks and extra means of getting around, but it would still be a cool monster to throw at your party. All right, so let me take a look and see. Okay, what questions do we have? Morning Toad, yes. Why do I see a black dragon drunk on Dwarven Ale going, yep, I'm going to nail that. So you're saying a bard can seduce this? Yeah, maybe perhaps. All right, I'm going to go on into the wrap-up. If you guys have any questions about the Basilisk that you would like answered from a mechanical or otherwise standpoint, let me know, and I'll check the chat again. All right, I have been DM Galabond. We have the other shows, the Walker of Waterdeep, the Sunday Planeswalking game at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the Sword Coast Chronicles, which is the 5th edition game, Thursday nights at 8 p.m. And we actually started background stories for several of the characters in the Greyhawk Saturday night game on Saturday night. Basically, we are starting in the little village of Hamlet so that we can begin with the storyline of the Temple of Elemental Evil. But the characters are from all over the central continent of Earth, where the great city of Greyhawk is located. And so they all have to make their way to the village of Hamlet for the adventure to start. And so I am getting them used to some of the peculiarities of 2nd edition, such as the fact that it uses proficiencies instead of skills or feats. And so having them go through and get a little bit accustomed to that, and doing a one-on-one session with them, which gives them an idea of, okay, are these really the proficiencies I want to take at first level? Do I want to swap anything out for something else? now that I understand how it works. And it also gives them a little bit of time to inhabit their character and RP with an NPC. And then there's if they succeed on what is a modified skills challenge that I am calling a proficiency challenge. If they succeed on that proficiency challenge, then they get an extra little boon by the time they arrive at Hamlet. I think the druid got a potion and a vial of holy water. The ranger got a couple of little things, and then the wizard got a couple of extra spells that she can put in her spell book. So those are some of the boons that they are getting to start off the game. All right, let me go back and double check. Okay. Skylin asks, what is used to fix petrification after the PC gets turned to stone? In 5th edition, that is a greater restoration spell. In other editions, there are other types of things. There was a stone to flesh spell and a stone to flesh. I think there was an oil of stone to flesh. It couldn't be a potion because obviously something that's stone can't drink a potion. But like an oil that you could spread over a piece of stone and it would turn to flesh. Now, if you put that oil on either a statue that had been carved as a statue or on a lump of rock, it would just become a big lump of flesh instead of a lump of rock. But if somebody had been petrified, like either by a basilisk or a Medusa or some other effect, I think a Gorgon also has the ability to petrify. That's one of the other monsters. Then the oil that turns stone to flesh would reanimate them and turn them back into the same flesh that they were before the petrification effect. But in 5th edition, it's just greater restoration. That will do the trick. Okay, his question is like a side note, but do you think a hippo can make a good battle mount? Oh, hey, Amy TV. Thank you for dropping by tonight. Could a hippo make a good battle mount? I suppose it could. I mean, if you have never actually traveled to see hippos in the wild, like if your only experience is seeing hippos in a zoo or seeing them on TV, you may not really realize just how terrifying a hippo is in the wild. There's only one creature in Africa that both lions and crocodiles are afraid of, and that's hippos. Because hippos just are, not only are they powerful creatures, but they're just mean. I mean, they are just absolutely mean creatures, and they have bad tempers. And when I was in Africa on photo safari, it was like the people that run the safari says, nope, we just stay. We'll get close enough that you can take pictures from a long way away, but we ain't getting very close to those hippos, because if they get a bug in their ear, they will just chase anything. And fortunately, because they've got very tiny legs and very large bodies, they can't run very far, but they can run pretty fast in a short distance. But I would think from a fantasy perspective, I mean, especially if you have something like a druid or a ranger that has a mystical ability to communicate with animals, and you got a hippo from a little bitty cub or whatever they're called, a baby hippo, and you raised it, you could probably get it to most of the time pay attention to you. I think if I were your DM, I would probably always, whether you knew it or not, I would probably always roll a die, and there would be a chance that the hippo would just, natural instinct would kick in, and you want to go that way, and it sees a threat over that way, it's going that way. And you're just along for the ride. But that's just me, because I like to do things like that and just throw a little bit of random chaos into the campaign from time to time. But if you have a really super nice, super sweet DM that will let you get away with doing anything, yeah, sure. Go ahead and do that. I would think so. Could totally see a barbarian having hippo as a battle mount in a river bandit clan or something similar. Oh yeah, absolutely, Amy. Amy Chibi. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. A river bandit clan. Oh yeah, that would be an amazing thing. And in fact, in that case, if you pitched that, I might be like, you know what? Explain to me how you when do you find this hippo? How do you start training this hippo? What is it? And if you can really convince me of that, I might say, that's just so cool. We're gonna run with it. And we're gonna let you get away with this. And then we'll just use I think there are hippo stats in the 5th edition monster manual as a beast. So yeah. Yeah, Battle Hippo does sound epic, Skyland. I agree. All right, are there any other questions? Valixion, having a hippo would take a lot of rations. You're right about that. It would require having a bunch of additional rations on there, because they are voracious eaters. They basically stand in the river all day, and they just eat. I think it's an interesting idea. Now, of course, Amy, I'm not your DM, so I don't make the rules for your DM. If when you go back to your table and you say, well, DM Caliban on the internet said that he thought it was a good idea, your DM is going to look at you and say, is he running your game? And you'll have to say no. And you say, that's right. Because it's your DM's table, and he or she makes the rules. So, but, just go ahead and give it your best creative thing, and, hopefully your DM will respond to you putting a lot of thought into it. Okay, hippos eat an average of 88 pounds of food a night. Good luck. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Ooh. Necromancer summons a skeletal dragon, and a warlock summons a shambling mound. Warlock orders the shambling mound to get inside the skeletal dragon, empty body to act as meat and muscles, so that both creatures. That I'm not so sure of. I'd have to think about that one. I couldn't give you a quick answer on that. But if your DM is game for it, then I say go for it. That's with any D&D game, the answer is always, if the players think it's cool and the DM will allow it, then yes, it's possible. So that's always the answer. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out. I am going to go ahead and the rule of cool, exactly. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the music a little bit, flip over here to the final page, and then I'm going to look for a someone that we can raid. Okay, let me go over here to the Twitch. And okay, we'll do that. And we are part of the small streamer community here, as well as a part of the Game Rebel Network. And last month, at the end of my streams, I always rated somebody from a part of the. I always rated somebody from Game Rebel, so this month I am rating somebody from Small Streamer at the end of each of my streams. So let's. Oh, Attack Rat is doing some art. Let's see, who else is doing some stuff? Okay. Okay. And there's Demeta Game is doing some Sims. It's been forever since I've seen any Sims. So let's go ahead and raid Demeta Game. Alright. Tell Demeta Game that we said hello. Hope you guys have a great evening, and I hope that we will see you back next Monday night for another Monster Monday. Also, don't forget Thursday night, 8 p.m., we do an actual play session, the Sword Coast Chronicles. On Saturday night, we're starting up a 2nd edition game with a tour de force of the original Temple of Elemental Evil. And then Sunday, we're doing a Planeswalking 5th edition Walker of Waterdeep game. Alright. And we're going to go ahead and raid in 3, 2, 1. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.